Hey, it's Scott Petrak with another episode of the Brown Zone Coverage Podcast. We have no need for a long-winded introduction today. The regular season has arrived, and the Browns and I will be headed to Charlotte this weekend. Here to discuss it all is Dave Chudowsky of the WKYC Morning News. You ready, Chud?
Scott, man, I'll tell you, there's just certain days of the year that fall above many other days, and this is one of them. I mean, it is just so exciting, especially for us over at Channel 3,
Yeah.
WKYC-NBC. We have the game tonight. Bills and Rams. What a great matchup! The defending champs against a team many think can win it all. Almost got there last year. So, we're pumped up. Tomorrow morning on Go, I have my Browns preview piece that is ready to go tomorrow. I enjoyed writing that, so I'm ready for that because, as you know, I did sports for a long, long time. So whenever I get to do those feature pieces, I enjoy that. So I just, it's awesome. Football's back. Browns on Sunday. I mean, really, this is what you hate to see the summer go, but this is what you wait all year for.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I don't like to see the weather turn so it can stay nice and sunny and warm for as long as possible. But, you fight through that preseason, I mean, there's a lot to talk about. There's a lot of storylines, but it drags on. So to get to the regular season, obviously we're taping this Thursday morning. So Thursday night's the first NFL game. And then it's just off and running, right? We got 17 Browns games over the next 18 weeks. Then you got the playoffs, obviously the Super Bowl. So this is certainly a fun time of year. And, I know there's some people that love college football, and I get it. I like college football, but I like the NFL better. And to have an NFL game tonight, and like you said, it's a marquee matchup, right? Bills, Rams. That does a tough game to pick. I'm in one of those pick 'em leagues. That does a tough game. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of excitement, and you don't have to look beyond the Browns, right? I mean, we've been talking about it for months, or at least even before the trade was official to Carolina. The Browns versus Baker Mayfield in Carolina. Obviously, a lot of excitement.
Yeah, and I love college football too, and I've debated people on this, and the NFL just stands alone. I mean, college football is great, and every Saturday has great storylines and things happen. But the problem with college football is like Ohio State this week, for example, they're like a 45-point favorite, right? I mean, it's like a preseason game in the regular season. So the NFL week to week is just so great. And this week, Browns, Panthers, and we didn't have a podcast last week, so we have a lot to cover here. So, we'll do some rapid fire to make sure we get everything in. But bottom line is Panthers, I've seen anywhere from a 2.5 to a 1.5 point favorite. When the lines first came out way back when, the Browns were a favorite. How do you kind of see this? We'll get into details, but just overall, I mean, the Browns 121-1 in their opener since 1999. I mean, you never feel good going into week one as a Browns fan.
No, I mean, that's a great point, right? And you can't get away from that number. However, it's a new team. It's a new season. I don't put a whole lot of stock in 121-1. I understand the fans have those scars. I'm not sure Kevin Stefanski and his team have those scars since it's only been 2 games. I thought under Stefanski, 2 openers under Stefanski. Obviously, the Browns played well last year in the opener in Kansas City, a really good team. Browns had chances to win, kind of gave the game away in the second half. Stefanski's first opener was the first game. They didn't have any preseason. They went up to Baltimore and it got drilled. In both instances, they came back and then went on a winning streak. So, I think sometimes we put too much emphasis on week one just because we built it up for so long. We've been waiting for it for so long. But this one's important. Number one, it's the Baker Mayfield matchup. Number 2, it's Jacoby Brissett's first chance to start for the Browns at quarterback. And we've talked about it, Chud. The schedule is easiest at the beginning. And the Browns are going to have to make hay in these first 4 games because then the schedule gets a lot more difficult before Deshaun Watson's scheduled to come back December 4th. And the schedule's tough after that too, but you think, okay, Deshaun Watson's back. But, the Browns, I think, realistically need to go 3-1 or 4-0 in the start to get their feet under them and to have some kind of cushion heading into a really brutal middle stretch. So, we'll talk about this matchup with Baker. I think it's going to be a good game. I think it's an interesting matchup. I'm a little bit surprised that the Panthers are the favorite now. I just think the Browns overall are more talented. But it's interesting. It really is. There's so much to discuss.
I'll go back to that 121-1 in the opener when we make our prediction at the end. So I'll get back to that. But let's get right to it. I mean, the storyline is Baker Mayfield, and so much of my piece tomorrow morning is centered around that. Whether you like it or not, whether you want to move on from it or not, you can't, because it just stares you right in the face. What's the attitude of the Browns? You've been in Berea all week long. What's the attitude of the players as they get ready to face their former quarterback?
Yeah, I think the overall attitude is, we're not going to make it about us versus Baker, and I think that's the message from Kevin Stefanski. And, Nick Chubb said the same thing, and Anthony Walker, and you can go down the line. I do think individually there's some guys in that locker room who are looking to go give it to Baker Mayfield, right? For whatever reason. Maybe they're buddies and they just want to get the upper hand, right, and have bragging rights. Maybe they didn't end on good terms, so they want to, show Baker what's what. Because obviously Baker's a big personality. There's no doubt about that. So I think he left an impression on anyone that he played with for the last 1, 2, 3, 4 years. I do think it's interesting. A couple of my favorite quotes from yesterday. Nick Chubb, I asked him, I said, do you expect there to be something extra from Baker? Like, what are you expecting? Because, I thought Baker would say something outrageous before the game, and he really hasn't. There's that whole, I'm going to F them up thing with Cynthia Fralin, that he denied and whatever. But he wasn't, he obviously didn't think he was on the record when he said that. So I'm just saying in front of the microphones, Baker has really bit his tongue and said all the right things, which surprises me because I thought at some point he would say something that really crossed the line and got everybody fired up or whatever.
He said, he's not a robot. That was a good one, the robot one.
Yeah, but I mean, I thought he might say, what, like, I'm going to go show them, or this one's for Kevin Stefanski, or something, something that was really outrageous, and he hasn't. But that doesn't mean pregame he's not going to do something, or during the game he's not going to do something, or postgame. I mean, remember when Hugh Jackson went down to Cincinnati to work for the Bengals, and at the end of the game, Baker stared him down for it was forever as he ran down the sideline, right? So, I haven't ruled out that Baker's going to do something. So I asked Nick Chubb, what are you expecting? And he said, we all know Baker. We don't know what to expect. And I just thought that was interesting. And then Anthony Walker, I asked him, because there's so much, from a football perspective, right? Who's got the edge? Baker knows the Browns schemes. He knows their personnel. The Browns obviously know Baker really well. They know his strengths. They know his weaknesses. So to me, it's a natural question. I just asked linebacker Anthony Walker Jr., I said, do you feel like you know Baker's weaknesses and how to exploit them? And he had this big, there was a smile, but it wasn't like a fun smile. It was like kind of a weird, he didn't, maybe a little awkward smile and a long pause. And then he said, we know Baker's strengths, blah, 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 blah. He just didn't want to go there. But I think that is the reality, that the Browns know what Baker doesn't do well, right? And that's part of that is you hem him in the pocket and you make him try to see around a lot of big bodies. He doesn't do that well, right? You try to force him maybe one way. So you make him, force him into tough decisions, quick decisions. You change your coverage, right? The stuff that we saw Baker, not identify defenses, maybe not find the open guys all the time, doesn't always see the field great. So obviously anybody who's seen the Browns knows, or seen Baker play for the Browns, knows where those weaknesses are. And obviously he does have strengths too. But I just thought that was an interesting kind of response from Walker. And then the last thing it got some run on Twitter after I tweeted it, Baker talked in Carolina yesterday, and the crux of one of his answers was he doesn't know why he doesn't have any answers for why the Browns moved on from him. And, maybe they never told him, but we know the answers, right? There's inconsistency. There was questions about his leadership, right? Like everyone else knows, but it's kind of interesting for Baker to say that he didn't have those answers.
He also said that no revenge. There's not a revenge factor. Do you buy that?
Not at all. I don't buy that one bit. He also referenced when he was at Oklahoma and went back to Texas Tech. Like that was clearly a revenge game. And he kind of lumped those together. So, I think that was him trying to say the right things. Then you have this, whatever sidebar of, his marketing team releases these off the leash T-shirts that reference, there's a broken dog collar, some orange on the T-shirts. Like, it's clearly a reference of getting away from Cleveland or getting away from the Browns. Baker's been really complimentary to Cleveland, the city, and the fans, but getting away from the Browns. And Baker's been off social media, but he comes back to promote those T-shirts. It's just kind of an interesting, kind of like footnote to all this, that even when he's on this kind of straight and narrow path, there's people around him and he's involved in something that's not outlandish by any means, but he's trying to make money, number one, and kind of poking the Browns a little bit with those T-shirts.
Scott, as a journalist, do you have an opinion about the whole thing with Cynthia Freeland and how that went down with Baker? And did you want to comment on that? I mean, it definitely was a huge deal when it came out.
Yeah, it was. I don't know. I mean, Baker denied it. She stood by it, that he said that to her. I tend to believe journalists, but, that doesn't mean that she was being truthful. I do think it sounded like some gray area listening to her interviews, whether or not she prompted that answer from Baker. Like, did she say those words and he just kind of said yes or repeated them back to her, which is different than her saying something else and Baker using those words. That's why I try not to make too big a deal of that story, because I do think it's a little hazy there how that went down. And, obviously Baker did not think that was an on-the-record comment. So, and she admitted this, if she acknowledged this, she should not have said it, right? She should not have used that as a public consumption or for public consumption. So I do think she erred there. I think there was a way to say, hey, I know Baker's fired up to go beat the Browns, without using the specific word she used that made it such a big story, and then led to Baker's denial.
All right, let's look at the other side now. Starting for the Browns, Jacoby Bersette, I believe 14-23 in his career as a starter, if I have that right.
Yep.
You've talked to him this week. He says he's ready for a chance, and the best is yet to come. I mean, are you buying it?
Yeah, it's interesting. I sat down with him. Yeah, I sat down with him last week, and then we talked to him yesterday as a group. But yeah, it's really interesting. I do buy it to some degree, Chud. I mean, obviously there's questions, right? He's a backup. We know that. The Browns view him as a bridge to Deshaun Watson. That doesn't mean he can't win games. That doesn't mean he's not extremely motivated to win games. And the Browns feel like he will make better decisions than Baker Mayfield made, right? Like, I think that's clear. I think they really feel like he's a better decision maker, better game manager than Baker Mayfield. And I think to some degree they also feel that way about Jacoby Bersette compared to Jimmy Garoppolo, right? When you looked at this quarterback landscape in the offseason, they like Jacoby Bersette. They trust him. And I think part of that is you watch the playoffs and you see Jimmy G make some bad mistakes. And they don't feel Jacoby Brissett's going to make those. Now, he's got to prove that, but through his career, he's thrown, I think it's more than 2-1. I think it's like 36-17 touchdowns to interceptions. So that speaks to his decision-making, his game management. Now, having said that, he's going to have to make some plays, right? You don't win in this league without your quarterback making plays. Now, he'll be helped by a big-time running game. He'll be helped by what's expected to be a big-time defense. So there's less pressure on him, but he's still going to have to make whatever it is, 3, 4, 5 plays a game, red zone, third down, fourth quarter. But where I think he has a chance to do that, and Andrew Berry, the GM, said this during one of the preseason broadcasts, is in the play-action shot game. And we saw Baker have success with that, where they fake the run, right? And he drops back and he has time, and you have the one guy deep. And if you can hit that pass, not only is it an easy touchdown, it's an explosive play. It should loosen up the defense to some degree. So if they believe, and they do, that Jacoby Bersette can excel in that area, and I talked to Bersette about that, and I talked to Anthony Walker about his ability to do that, then there is a formula there for the Browns to win some games and have some explosive plays. And, I flash back to the Tennessee game in 2020. The Browns came out throwing with those type of plays and had a lot of success. They had success on those against the Bengals last year in Cincinnati, and probably their best game of the year. So that's how Kevin Stefanski wants his offense to work. And I think that's an area that if Bersette can do it, and he has some history doing it in Indianapolis, that's a formula for success. The other two things I took away from Bersette is he chose to come here because he knew he would start. Now, he didn't know how long he would start, right? But the assumption was Deshaun Watson was going to be suspended. And he was adamant to me that he chose this because it feels like a tough situation, right? You're keeping a seat warm for Deshaun Watson. You didn't take a bunch of first-team reps early in training camp or throughout the entire offseason. And Bersette said, hey, I wanted this because he wanted a chance to start because he feels he's a starter and he doesn't want to be tied into that journeyman label or the bridge quarterback label. And he said, hey, I'm 29. I'm not old. I'm just getting started. And he feels like his story is still being written and the best is yet to come. Now, first of all, that's the right attitude to have. Second of all, that doesn't mean he's going to go 8-3 as a Browns starter. But I thought it was interesting to hear him say that. And I think he's in the right state of mind for this, what is a difficult situation. I'm going to start 11 games and then hand it over. But he wants to prove something in those 11 games.
Yeah, that's a great nugget, man. Really well done there. And I got to tell you, you kind of got me fired up. Anyone listening right now, they might go run through a wall thinking Bersette's going to go 11-0. I mean,
I wouldn't count
no,
that.
I know. You make great points, though. That's good. But the bottom line is, though, in an NFL league where you think passing first, with the Browns, you got to feel, a lot of Chubb, right? I mean, there's going to be a lot more Chubb. Is it time to go even more Chubb, I guess?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. I do. And I know the Browns have been careful about overusing him, and I understand it. In 2020, they worked it, almost to perfection, right? The balance of Chubb and Hunt, and it's 16 touches, 17 touches a game. It's not overwhelming him like you see a Derrick Henry get, overused, or, maybe that's not fair to say overused, but get used a ton, right? But I think it's okay to give Chubb a couple more carries. I'm not saying 25 a game, but if it's 20, 21 a game, I don't think that's too much. I do still think you'll see a bunch of Kareem Hunt. Nick Chubb thinks Kareem Hunt's in a good mental state despite, not getting that contract extension, not getting his trade request met. We haven't talked to Hunt yet. I'm hoping to talk to him today or tomorrow because I really want to hear from him how he's approaching this season. But I think you're going to see, I think you'll see a lot of Nick Chubb. I think you'll see a lot of Kareem Hunt. And I don't know if it'll be week one, but I do think you'll see more of Chubb and Hunt on the field together because we've talked about this receiving core, right? We talked about this receiving core and there's question marks. And I think the way you would leave some of those questions is you put your best players on the field. And those guys are clearly two of your best offensive players. And Hunt is in the last year of his contract. So why not try to get as much out of him as possible?
Yeah, good point. I want to go back to the last preseason game against the Bears and combine that with roster cuts and signings and injuries. Heading into week one, how do you feel the starters did against the Bears to give them? Did they get any momentum heading into this first game? And then also bring us all up to date on what you think of the roster cuts. Were there any surprises? Who they've picked up since, and any injuries we need to worry about?
Yeah, I don't think there's any momentum coming out of that preseason finale. And the fact is, it feels like it's 2 weeks ago. So even if they played well, I don't know how much momentum they would carry over. But the offense struggled. It took like 6 series before Jacoby Bersette could lead a field goal drive. The defense gave up a bunch of points to Justin Fields. Having said that, the Browns are probably without their top 4 defensive players in Garrett, Clowney, Ward, and Newsome. On offense, they didn't have either running back that we talked about, Joe Bitonio, Jack Conklin, or Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb. So, I don't know how fair a picture that is, that you get from that game. And I think the Browns met their goal of keeping everyone healthy, right? The only person that didn't practice Wednesday was Jadeveon Clowney, and he has an illness. So, the hope is that he's back today or tomorrow and that he's able to play Sunday. Kevin Stefanski seemed pretty optimistic about that. You never know when you hear illness these days, but Stefanski said they expect him back. And I really, heading into this opener, Chud, the only injury I mean, outside of the Clowney illness, the only injury to think about is Jack Conklin. And it's not a new injury. He's just still coming back from that torn patellar tendon last year, suffered in November, surgery in December. He's been practicing. The Browns just want to see like how he stacks practices. Does he go 2 or 3 days in a row before they give him the complete green light to start? So I think there's still some uncertainty there whether or not he'll be the starter. But if it's not week 1, it'll be soon. Hopefully we know more, today or tomorrow, whether or not he's going to be the guy on Sunday, because obviously the Browns really could use him. He's a 2-time All-Pro. If he's back to where he always has played, then that's a huge boost for them. And then as far as roster moves, and I was a little surprised they kept Chase Winovich. Was hurt for a good chunk of the preseason, but the Browns think he can rush the passer, off the bench. So, they really value that. So I get why they kept him, but it was interesting just because I really haven't seen him do much. Right before he got hurt, I didn't see him do much. Then he got hurt, but the Browns traded for him for a reason. Little surprised they kept safety Richard LeCounte III, but Andrew Berry does not cut his draft picks. He's never cut one of his draft picks in 3 years. All those guys are either on the team or there's a couple guys on IR, which is really amazing. And, I think there's a bias there, and they probably have to be more honest in their talent evaluation and not just stick with their draft picks. But it's certainly interesting that he has the faith in all his draft picks. And then since then, they signed a backup tackle, Joe Haig, in case Conklin isn't ready, in case Chris Hubbard isn't ready, who he had, torn triceps last year, so he didn't play after the opener. So they have some depth there. And then they signed tight end Jesse James, a veteran, played in Pittsburgh, was drafted by Pittsburgh, played several years, and he's a big guy, more of a blocker. But it fills a need because the Browns only had 2 tight ends on their roster, David Njoku and Harrison Bryant. And this gives Stefanski the ability to run more of those 2 and 3 tight end sets. I don't know if they'll run as many of them as this year as they have in the past. Maybe they will with Bersette, and then when you get to Watson, you open things up more. But having James in that really proven blocker, I think it allows Stefanski to do some of the things he likes to do with the 2 and 3 tight end sets and that play action passing game we talked about earlier.
All right, before we get to rapid fire, just let everyone know about the Panthers scouting report. You don't have to go too in depth, but just for the diehard fans, they probably know a lot. And for guys and gals that don't follow too much, I mean, they know Christian McCaffrey, but They might not know too much more.
Yeah, it's interesting. They have some playmakers. You mentioned McCaffrey. They have Rashard Higgins from the Browns. He traded for a receiver last week. So they got some guys on offense. Like there's some pieces there. On defense, they have some speedy pass rushers. They have J.C. Horn at corner. That's a young guy that's really good. He's had some injury history, but he's back. I'm kind of interested to talk. I think we're going to talk to Amari Cooper today and to talk to Cooper about J.C. Horn because he studies those corners like crazy. So, I don't think there's anybody outside of McCaffrey that blows you away on that roster, but they certainly have pieces. When we're talking about matchups, Judd, right? And this league is so much about matchups. They have a rookie left tackle, number 6 pick in the draft. But, so I'm reading some stuff out of Carolina this week, and obviously they love his talent, right? Number 6 pick in the draft. But it's not like he had a great training camp, from you reading this stuff. So I don't know how they're going to deal with Myles Garrett. And that's the kind of thing where, Baker Mayfield, when he gets to the line of scrimmage, is going to see where Myles Garrett is and, okay, how are we going to block this guy? And I just feel like this is a game that Myles can wreck, right? Like if he has whatever, 2, 3, 3.5 sacks, whatever that number is, he could change the game. And I think the Panthers won't have full trust in this left tackle. So how do they compensate for that? Do they roll Baker away from Myles like all game? Do they double and triple Myles, which then obviously if you do that, you leave other guys one-on-one and you don't get as many guys out in pass routes, which makes it tougher for Baker. If he's rolling right all the time, does that set you up for Jadeveon Clowney and JOK to have big games because they know where Baker's going? So I think that's a matchup to watch because I think if you're Carolina, you have to be worried that if this guy does not handle Myles Garrett, the game could get away from you in a hurry.
All right. You ready to go rapid fire before we do prediction?
Yeah, let's go.
All right. 20 seconds on the clock. Before I start, though, did you sit down with Myles Garrett this week? Or
It was last week. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because I do want to say everybody can go to brownzone.com and read all the stuff. Not everything is up yet, because the season preview just went to print last night. But I had the Jacoby Bersette interview, and that story's posted. I posted a Myles Garrett one this morning, and Myles is so interesting. We could have talked about a million things, but a couple of the big takeaways is, he thinks, I was asking, do you think you're in your prime? Because he's not even 27 yet. You get to 27. I've read once that's kind of when athletes hit their prime. And he said he feels like he's been playing if not at his prime level, close to it, and keeps getting better. And he thinks he can play at that level for another decade. And I said, well, Myles, when you came out, it felt like, you had all these other interests, and maybe you wouldn't play that long. You'd kind of have a short, brilliant career and then retire. And the way he was talking didn't feel like that anymore. And he said he thinks he can play at a high level for another decade. He is inspired by guys like Tom Brady and LeBron James. And I said, well, does that mean you got like another contract or two in you? And he said, at least one. So to me, that is a sign that Myles is really going to stick around for a long time and play at just this incredibly high level that he has as he chases Defensive Player of the Year, as he's committed to bringing a championship to Cleveland. And then as he wants to go get that sack record, which is 22.5, and he thinks he can go get 24. So I think there's some interesting nuggets. We talk about the relationship with Jadeveon Clowney, which he called explosive. So I sat down with him, and just the last quick one. We might have talked about this before, but I finally wrote this story about Amari Cooper as a route runner. And I thought it was fascinating. It hasn't posted yet, but keep an eye out for that, because he just takes you in depth. He thinks they're the keys to route running.
Yeah, you talked about that before. I can't wait to read that, because that's some good inside stuff there. Well, I've always told people not to go buy jerseys necessarily, because, you never know how long you're going to have them with the names on the back, but maybe Myles Garrett's the jersey to go get.
Yeah, it really is, right? For a while, it was Joe Thomas, who was about the only one you could trust. Now maybe Myles Garrett and Nick Chubb. DJ Moore is one of the receivers for Carolina. And then I didn't want to butcher the guy's name, so I just called it up. The left tackle is Ikem Ekwonu. So, yeah, right. I needed to look that up before I said it. So, those are the guys that got Robbie Anderson at receiver. Brian Burns is one of their pass rushers. You got to keep an eye on. But there's not a lot of huge names, when you look at their rosters, because they're kind of, they've been bad the last few years, right? So they've had some turnover. Their coach is in his third year. But those are the names I would keep an eye on.
Well, in the fantasy world, a lot of people are high on DJ Moore, figuring that, he finally has a quarterback that can pepper him the ball with Baker. Right.
And they have him and then Higgins, and they made that trade for Laviska Shenault Jr. He's that other receiver. So Baker does have some targets if he has time to throw the ball.
Yeah, sure. All right, let's go to rapid fire now. Hold on, let me get my clock back set up here. So we got to keep you tight here.
Yep.
All right, here we go. Rapid fire. Number one, do you believe that as long as Bersette keeps the Browns around, that Deshaun Watson will be able to just come right in and save the day?
I don't. I mean, I think it's asking too much. It'll be a 700-day layoff between regular season games for Watson to come in and go 5-1, maybe even 4-2 is a stretch. So I think the least that Jacoby Bersette needs to do, and it's not just him, but the team needs to be 6-5 at least, and then you hope Deshaun Watson goes 4-2, and you hope 10 wins is enough to get you in the playoffs.
Season captains. How about that?
Yeah, it was interesting. I meant to ask Stefanski about that, and he brought it up. It was weird that he didn't install captains the first 2 years. He just made it a game thing, so he had a different guy every week. I thought that was weird. There was a COVID year in 2020, so maybe that made it tougher to pick captains, and he was a new coach. But I think it's better to do it this way, and I don't think there's any surprises on this list of 5. It's Chubb and Bitonio and Garrett and Anthony Walker and then Charlie Hewlett on special teams. It's kind of interesting. There's no quarterback, but that's the situation the Browns are in, right? Obviously, it's not going to be Deshaun Watson. And do you vote for Jacoby Bersette when he's really, a placeholder? It probably doesn't make sense. So these 5 guys, they make a lot of sense.
Scott, how did it feel to go into the locker room for the first time in a while?
Yeah, it was nice. It was nice because obviously you like to be back in there, right? You get to walk up to guys without everyone else around, without having to set something up in advance. So it was nice. They've changed a couple things. There's some their names, the player names are kind of lit up as opposed to just being like a standard placard. There's some electronics going on there. They mixed, like sometimes some coaches do like all the players, all the offensive linemen together, all the receivers together. Stefanski's got everybody mixed, veterans next to rookies. So it was good to be back in there. It really was because it had been since 2019.
Yeah. All right, 2 more. Is Stefanski on the hot seat this year? If things don't go well, if he doesn't win enough games, could the Haslam say goodbye?
Yeah, I wouldn't say hot seat because I think, to me, things need to go worse before you're on the hot seat, right? Like Matt Rule is on the hot seat because he's had 2 bad years. He's headed into year 3. Like, there's obvious if you don't win now, you're in trouble. So I don't think Stefanski's at that point at all, right? He's had 2 years. He had 1 really good year and then 1 slightly below average year. Having said that, I do think there is pressure on Kevin Stefanski. You mentioned the Haslams. Yeah, we know the Haslams, right? We know their impatience. We know their tendency to change things out. So I do think there's pressure on Kevin Stefanski, but I think it's premature to say hot seat. But if this season goes sideways, then I certainly think it's not reasonable. I think it's possible that there could be big changes, right? Now, that's a long way down the road. But yeah, like I don't know if it was you asked me, Chud, or somebody asked me, do you think these guys have, maybe it was a mailbag, will Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski get a mulligan because of the whole Watson situation? And I just don't think that's how the Haslams operate, right? Like, I really do think they'll evaluate this season for this season. And if things go really bad, there could be fallout.
All right, got to move on. Last one, AFC North. Sleep on it or don't sleep on it? I've heard some people say, they're not worried about the AFC North. Man, I disagree.
Oh, yeah, you cannot sleep on this division. You can never sleep on this division. I think Baltimore's going to be really good. I picked Baltimore to win the division. I think the Cincinnati's going to be really good. I just think there'll be some, letdown or regression from going to the Super Bowl. That doesn't mean they can't go back to the Super Bowl, but maybe they, are the wild card. That's how I have them, as a wild card behind Baltimore. And I think Pittsburgh's going to be 8-9 or 9-8. And the Browns are going to be right there too. So if all 4 teams in the division win at least 8 games, then you can't sleep on the division.
All right, prediction time. Here we go. Man, we've waited a while to do this. Last year, I think we did pretty well on this, but let's give it a go here. You want to go first or second?
Give me second.
All right. Okay. So I'll go first here. And I got to tell you, I think neither outcome would surprise me. And I know people are like, oh, well, that's that. Well, but here's the deal. There's a lot of times where I would be surprised. I'd be like, you know what? There's no chance they're winning this game, or the other way around. I do think they could go in and win this game, but I'm going to go with Carolina, and I'm going to go 2017. And people might be upset about that, but here's the thing. And I know you don't take a lot of stock in 121-1, but I do. And the reason I do is I think that kind of is a poster of the Browns and the way they've been since they've been back, and the drama in Berea. And, there's something about the Yankees. There's something about the Steelers. Like, I can't necessarily put my finger on it, but I just do think something exists with that 121-1. And until you show me you can do it, and I tell you that all the time, Scott, I'm a believer in show me, and then I'll pick you, right? So go ahead and win this first game. Then I'll pick you to win the first game next year. I need them to show me they can do it. I'm not going to trust in that they can do it. So I'm going to go 2017 Carolina. Now, if they had a star quarterback, or I also need to see that they can win games with Jacoby Bersette. That's the other thing. I just need visual proof that they can do it before I go out on a limb. So I'm going to go ahead and pick 20-17.
Yeah, Chad, all that makes sense. It really does. I think they're more talented than Carolina. And that doesn't
Sure,
always,
agreed.
right? That doesn't always
Agreed.
lead to wins. I get it. And they've been more talented than teams they played in openers in the past, and they still lost. I remember, I think they went down and played a bad Tampa team, and I thought they'd win, and they wound up losing, right? Jake Delhomme rolls an ankle. I mean, oh my gosh, I'm dating myself here, but right.
We could do a whole podcast on the first week games. I mean,
bad
how many
openers, right?
Yeah, the 9-6 or 6-3 losses and helmets and all kinds of different stuff, right?
Braylon Edwards dropping a wide open post route that set a terrible tone for the season when they were. I think that was 2008. They're supposed to be good. So yeah, I get what you're saying, but I think they're more talented than the Panthers. I'm not convinced Baker's going to light it up. And by your score, you're not either, right? 2017 isn't Baker, lighting it up and shoving it down the Browns' throats. But I think I like the Browns' defense. I like their pass rush. I like it more if Clowney plays. Obviously, I like their secondary. I think there's going to be chances for interceptions from Baker Mayfield and maybe a sack fumble. And if that happens, it can turn the tide. So I think, or I know, Baker versus Browns defense, I'm going to take the Browns defense. I agree with you. It's going to be low scoring. I almost went 2017. But I'm going to go Browns 20-13. And I think the defense makes a statement early in the season that, hey, we're as good as we say we are. And that starts against Baker. Now, maybe Christian McCaffrey changes things, right? Because he's that kind of player. He's healthy. Maybe makes a couple plays that change the game. But I'm going to go Browns. I'm going to go 2013. I thought about 2017. But I'm going to go Browns 20-13.
So we're neither of us are married to the prediction, but
no. But I feel kind of good about the Browns winning.
You do? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't bet the house on it. I can see how they could lose. Right? You laid out a path for them to lose. I laid out a path. Christian McCaffrey has a couple big plays. Baker plays really smart. Whatever it is. Jacoby Bersette plays poorly. But I kind of like the Browns in this game. Again, just because I think they're more talented, and I think the defense has a chance to shut down Baker.
That's fair. All right. I hope you're right and I'm wrong.
Well, it wouldn't be the first time, Chud. Hey, before we go, I need a season prediction from you. We haven't done that yet, have we?
Oh, gosh. Yeah, we have not done a season prediction. What? Man. That is so hard with, not knowing for sure. Oh, man. Caught off guard. I should have been ready for this.
Well, I could kill 12 seconds for you. I'm going to go 8-9. It just, I wrote a prediction column. It'll post at some point. Like, I could see it going a million different ways, right? They start well. They win a couple games. You don't expect them to win. Deshaun Watson comes back and finishes it. Like, I can see how they get to the playoffs. But having said that, I can also see how it could go wrong. And I think the schedule's hard. We talked about, I don't think Watson's going to go on some crazy run when he gets back. All this distraction, all this uncertainty, it just feels like this team is going to go 8-9. And I think there's some kind of symbolism there. They went 8-9 last year, had all kinds of upheaval, right? Changed the biggest position on the team. And I still think they're going to go 8-9.
Yeah. Well, I remember last year, how everyone was going double-digit wins and some were saying 12 or 13. I mean, it could be and I went 10. And I remember people were like only 10 and geez, they didn't even get to 10. So I'll go 8-9. I'm going to go with you. I mean, I'm trying to go 9-8. I want to go 9-8, but I'm trying to think in order for that to happen. So that would mean Watson would go 4 and let's say Watson went 4-2, but that would mean Bersette would have to win 5 games.
Yeah, they have to go 5-6.
They'd have to go 5-6. And we broke that down a couple weeks ago with Bersette, and what did we have them at 4?
It was hard. Yeah, I mean the schedule goes Chargers and there's Buccaneers and you're at Miami and the division games. Like, it's hard after the first 4 games, and one of the first 4 games is the Baker game. One of them is Pittsburgh in prime time, right? It's not like
Yeah.
It's not like all these games are gimmies, but it's certainly the softest part of the schedule. So I get it. And if I'm at 8-9 and you're at 8-9 or 9-8, that's them missing the playoffs, right? Which would be a big disappointment because this roster feels like it's talented enough to go to the playoffs. But it would be, I mean, I think it's fair to say it would be the quarterback situation, right?
Yeah.
That they don't get enough play out of their quarterback because the Pro Bowler is suspended for 11 games, right? I think you could draw a direct line there. And then the Browns, yes, they think they're set up for the future, but that move would really come back to bite them in 2022.
Yeah, and again, I think if we go back to the last time we did it, I think I had them winning 4 games. So I guess in that regard, I would, in order to go 9-8, I'd have to give Watson a 5-1 record, and I just don't know if that's possible.
They play all 3 division opponents when he comes back.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, I'm trying to go different than 8-9 than you, but I just think that's such a good record. It's hard to go against it. I mean, I think maybe if I think you go 8-9 and you hope that they surprise people and win some games that you didn't expect them to. There's a lot of people. I'm kind of confused by this, Scott. Listening to some people around town, why are the Browns given such a pass on last year? And everyone thinks that with Watson, they're just so talented. I know you always talk about how talented their roster is, but they haven't proven to me yet that they deserve to be a team that is one of the better teams in the NFL.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, Chud, and you're not wrong. To beat a dead horse, I think it's about the quarterback. If Baker played better last year, they would have gone to the playoffs, right? If he doesn't throw 4 picks on Christmas Day in Green Bay, then they have a chance, right? If it wasn't his fault he had COVID, right? They lose to the Raiders on that crazy COVID reschedule game, and they could have been in first place in the division. Instead, they're in last place. There were chances for them last year, and in my opinion, Baker didn't play well enough. And we could fight about whether or not there's the shoulder injury or not, but the quarterback wasn't good enough, and they blew up everything to improve the quarterback spot, and they have from a football perspective. But that guy can't play for the first 11 games, and has brought a black cloud over this organization. So until you start to see Deshaun Watson play like a Pro Bowler, then you can't. I think it's hard to predict greatness from the Browns, and I do think that it goes back to the quarterback means so much. And even if you have all these other pieces, it gives you a chance, which is why 8-9 isn't that far from 8-9 isn't that far from 10-7, which probably gets you in the playoffs, right? So if you're able to run the ball great and your defense plays great, if the Browns get a bunch of turnovers on defense this year, then that's how you win a couple games. You should, you don't expect to win. So they're right there, but the position that needs to put you over the top is your quarterback, and the Browns have big questions at quarterback. Even though Bersette gives them a chance, if you rank the starting quarterbacks in the league, he's at the bottom because he's generally considered a backup, right? So it's so much about quarterback. It was last year, and it's going to continue to be about it this year.
Yeah. I think bottom line is probably in that 7, 8, 9 range, right? I think. Yeah. I mean, I think we'd be shocked if they only won 4 games, but I think we'd also be shocked if they won 12 or 13.
Oh, there's no doubt. Now, I think I would see an easier path to 4, right? But you get off to a bad start, stuff goes sideways, Bersette gets hurt, whatever. We've seen it enough here where things go off the rails. Bersette would have to play great or way above expectations for the Browns to get to 12 wins. Right? It just, that seems hard for me to get my head around. And this is it's not a knock on Jacoby Bersette. It's just, this is a tough league. There's a lot of good quarterbacks in the AFC. When you match them up, you go, Brissette's not as good as this guy. He's not as good as Burrow. He's not as good as Jackson. He's not as good as Herbert. He's not as good as Brady. You go down the Browns schedule. So, yeah, it's harder to get there. Now, the Browns believe they have a formula to give them a chance, and I believe that they do. I'm not arguing that at all, but it goes back to the beginning of the conversation. You need your quarterback to make a certain number of plays, and we've yet to see Bersette do that in a Browns uniform consistently, right? And he didn't really do it, in Indy. He went 7-8 was his best year. That's pretty good, but that's the same as 8-9, right? Now, the argument is the talent's better in Cleveland, and it is. So we'll have to see if that leads to wins. But that's the hope, certainly for him and the organization, is that he's going to get enough support that his game will be lifted and he'll make those plays. And again, I'm not ruling that out, but the schedule's hard. You need to see it first. You need, like you always say, you need to see this team do it on a consistent basis. And really, they did it in 2020 for that last stretch, and that's about it.
Yeah. Oh man, I'll tell you, you threw me a curveball there. I should have been prepared for that. And I guess it's just been such a weird offseason, feeling like it's two different teams, that it's hard to come up with one record because it just feels like two different teams.
No, that's a good point, Chud. And I didn't mean to throw you for a loop, but I didn't want to get that on the record.
So I'm going to shock you all, and I'll just go 9-8 to be different. And
Fair
just
enough.
somehow they win a couple games you didn't expect. And also, I don't get a lot of hate emails since I picked them to lose in week 1. But I think 7, 8, 9 is kind of in the area there. But before I go, man, I just want to say I am pumped for fantasy football. My 27th year as a commissioner of my league. It all starts tonight. And then, Scott, you go on Sirius Satellite Radio with the fantasy show with John Hansen, Fantasy Football Morning, the guru. And you've been on with him many times. I ended up getting in his league, the Adam Kaplan Invitational. Had to send in a video, and I was one of the 9 that got in. So I'm pumped for that. That all starts up tonight. So he is awesome at fantasy, and I'm pumped up to be in there.
Yeah, that's awesome. And yeah, we struck up a conversation once at the Combine. Now I see him every year at the Combine. Adam Kaplan and I worked together way back in the day. He knows his stuff. So that's pretty exciting to be in that league, buddy.
Yeah. The guru always says, get there. And I got there, baby. And I'm ready. Now I'm not just happy I got there. I want to go win it and win it for Cleveland, baby. Bring home the ACI trophy for the city of Cleveland.
There you go. You and LeBron.
Yeah,
Cool.
there you go. Yeah.
Perfect.
How about that?
Yeah, good. All right, Chud, thank you so much, buddy. I think this was a good episode. We got jammed a lot in. I know you got places to go. We'll do this next week, and we'll have a game to talk about, huh? So that should be fun. So thanks.
Sounds great, man. Enjoy your trip.
Oh, thank
Bring
you.
home
Yeah, I'll be in Charlotte. So thanks everybody for listening. Again, go to brownzone.com. You can read all the always read all my work, but I had a lot of sit downs during training camp and in the last week with some of the big name guys on the team. So I wrote about that, and it'll be posting in the next couple days. So thanks everybody. This has been another episode of the Zone Coverage Podcast.